I got bangs and they're too long already, and I've washed them somewhere between 12 and 18 hours ago, and they already look this greasy. Hi, I'm Bailey. This will hopefully be a succinct recitation of my favorite books of 2021. I always wait until the next year to actually compile this list because sometimes the very last thing you read you absolutely love, and I don't want to malign the last read of the year. Also, my birthday is the last day of the year, so I am particularly annoying about waiting until the year is over to do year wrap-up things. Because I'm like, you haven't even gotten to my birthday yet. It's not the end. Wait. I understand that having these lists compiled earlier is useful for like shopping reasons or, I don't know, other things. Mostly it's for shopping. But in 2021, I read 118 books, which is very exciting. I'm gonna pop up some charts as I talk about things. My favorite stat, 32 of these books made me cry. If a book made me cry, I probably loved it. I don't think there's anything below a 4-star that made me cry. I could be wrong. I might have cried at one book I hated. I will pop up a genre breakdown. I read a lot of fantasy. It is slightly under half of what I read, and then the rest of it is everything else. Here's a pie chart for the racial breakdown of authors that I read. Obviously, I could do better reading a broader diversity of folks. The main step I am taking to fix this is I'm trying to buy more books by people of color. I need to fix my supply. Here's a pie chart of the percentage of queer authors I read this year. To my knowledge, obviously, this could be incorrect, which is why I'm not showing like who the queer authors are, because there's some people I don't know if they're out publicly, and then some people I'm sure are out and I just haven't found them. And also I think that these kind of breakdowns obviously are weird for people who aren't out, like being counted as the wrong thing, but I can't do anything about that. I don't know. I've got complicated feelings. Here is a publication year. I read mostly new releases and newer releases, but I've read some slightly older stuff. If anyone is interested in the publishing houses I read from, here's that. A statistic that I always think is really interesting is here's the percentage of like new to me authors I've read. And then last little quick statistic is here's the percentage of books I reread. I also just had a really fantastic reading year in general. I tend to be pretty good at picking books that I'm going to really enjoy, and I have a slight propensity to not complete books that I'm not enjoying. If I don't like it, why am I gonna spend my free time reading it, So I read lots of books that I end up giving 4 and 5 stars to. I think I gave more 5 stars than I gave any other rating. I don't know, I liked so many things this year, so picking a favorites list was a tad challenging. I had slightly under 30 books that I was kind of arguing for. I've narrowed it down to 15. I'm going to just briefly show the 10 before that, so 25, but I'm only going to actually talk about 15 of them. My average rating this year was 4.2, so clearly I enjoyed what I read most of the year. I had a great time. I think I only read one 1-star book, so it was great. Obviously, I think a perfect reading year would be all 5s. That doesn't seem super likely, but maybe we'll get there one day. That would probably be just a year of rereading. But one of my least favorite things I read this year was a reread, so things can surprise you. Here are my 10 honorable mentions. I had a great time reading all of these books. I would specifically like to call out The Space Between Worlds by Micaiah Johnson and Infinite Country by Patricia Engel. I've put them in a vague order, vaguely, like I'm going to go from 15 up to my favorite book. 2 I feel the most strongly about are right at the top. They are number 1 and 2. They're kind of interchangeable. I will try to not be repetitive. I gave all of these 5 stars. I loved them all so much. They were all so good. All of that. So, starting with number 15, In an Absent Dream by Seanan McGuire. I started the series in 2021. I've read the first 5. I've got book 6, and then book 7 comes out this month. I really truly love all 3 of these. I love the whole series, really. You do not have to read most of the series in order. It's like starting with book 1, every other book you should read in order, but all of the even number books you can read whenever. This is an even number book, but I would just start at the beginning. It's a very fun time. The series is about children who go through portals to other worlds, and now they're back in our world, and they all are sent to this boarding school for, you know, the little weirdos who went through the portals. This book is about a little girl named Catherine Lundy who goes through a door into a world. It's a goblin market. Everything happens on a barter system, and it is exceptionally interesting. I think about this book all the time. I love this book so dearly. I think that a lot of people really love book 2, but I'm a big proponent of book 4. The way this book talks about family and money and friendship and our expectations of each other is all top-notch. I already feel like I'm putting a book too far down on my list, but I'm not going to argue with my past self. It doesn't matter. My next book is Lore by Alexandra Bracken. This is a YA fantasy. It's been pitched as Percy Jackson meets the Hunger Games. I think it's a great time. If you want to read a very feminist engagement with ancient Greek mythology, I highly recommend this book, especially if you have interesting feelings about Athena. I think the character is really strong. I think the world's really interesting, and it's a fast, fun read. Highly recommend. Next up, I have She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. This is an adult fantasy set in China in the 1300s. It's set during a war. There's a lot of political elements. There's a lot of discussion of gender, and it is very, very good, very interesting. A little dark. Aurora's End by Amy Kaufman and Jay Kristoff. I really love Amy Kaufman in general. I've been reading this series with my sister since it started, so part of my love for this series is that I like reading it with her. This is the third and final book in the Aurora Cycle series. This series is very Starfleet Academy-y. It's a group of young misfits who are graduating from Aurora Academy. They essentially work for the space version of the UN. The whole series is a fun time. I specifically like what this book does with the timeline. I think it's very interesting. I think it's done very well. You can tell that the whole series was plotted very well. Next up, The Dragon Republic by R.F. Kuang. Also The Burning God, but I think I liked The Dragon Republic a little more, so that's what I'm putting on the list. This is the second book in the Poppy War trilogy. I, like everyone else, am obsessed with R.F. Kuang. This is a war fantasy. This is dark. I really like what this book does with the character relationships. I think it builds interesting animosity, and I think it's a really well done character journey. I like this book so much. I think this is a superb book too. The Anthropocene Reviewed by John Green. This is an adult, kind of a memoir, kind of an essay collection. I highly recommend this to like fun fact kind of people, but also people who like memoir. Green goes through various topics, rating them on a 5-star scale. You will hear about how he feels about scratch and sniff stickers, but really it's about his childhood, or Halley's Comet, but really it's about his relationship with his dad. It's a very well done memoir. I liked it so much. I also feel like this one should be higher up, but I like everything ahead of it. Transcendent Kingdom by Ya Jesse. This is literary fiction or general fiction. I never know what the distinguishing factor between those two things are. This book follows PhD candidate Gifty. She's in her 6th year of trying to get her PhD. You follow her story, specifically her relationship with her mother and brother. It is told in a non-linear fashion. It is one of the most excellent explorations of family I have read. I think it's amazing. This book talks a lot about addiction and race and the immigrant experience. It's so good. You should, if you like general fiction at all and you haven't read Ya Jesse, read Ya Jesse. She is a tremendous plotter and her character work is superb. I have another installment in a series, A Reaper at the Gates by Saba Tahir. I read books 2 to 4 this year. I think 3 was my favorite of the bunch, but I gave all of them 5 stars. I liked them all so much. But I chose book 3 because I really was tremendously impressed by the character work in book 3. I thought it was amazing. This YA fantasy centers on a war. It is incredibly well done. It's a very nuanced story. The magic is really interesting. The character relationships are really fun to read. This series had me turn around on a character more completely than I've turned around on any character ever before. So I really enjoyed that reading experience. I'm tremendously impressed by Tahir's ability to write character journeys. I think she's fantastic. And the magic's super fun. I think now we're at book 7. I have a Little Blue Encyclopedia for Vivian by Hazel Jane Plant. I love this book so much. I think it is tremendous. This is adult fiction. It's got a super weird structure. It follows our main character, who is a trans lesbian whose friend, who was also a trans woman who our main character was clearly in love with, has recently died. She decides to write an encyclopedia about their friendship. So it's, structured alphabetically. And in addition to being about their friendship, it's also about this fictional British television show they watch together. It is so good. I love this book. If you need something weird and wonderful and deeply human, this. Feel free to judge me. My next book is A Court of Silver Flames by Sarah J. Maas. It's adult fantasy, strong romance vibes. This is the follow-up to her A Court of Thorns and Roses series. I think this book handles grief tremendously well. This book is 750 something pages, and I read it one night and then that morning. And I read it so quickly I developed eye strain and I cried a bunch. I just had a really good time reading this book, so I think it would be disingenuous to leave it off this list. Next up is Rosalind Palmer Takes the Cake by Alexis Hall. You might know Hall from Boyfriend Material. This is his most recent series he started. It is essentially the Great British Bake Off, but rom-coms. The first one follows Rosalind Palmer. She is a bisexual single mom who, loves baking. This book does have a love triangle. It is one of my favorite uses of the love triangle. I think it is done very, very well, and not how you would expect from someone writing a bisexual character. This book talks a lot about class and family. There are mentions of sexual assault in this book, just as a heads up. The romance is very cute. It's full of food puns, the book, not the romance. It's just a really tremendously good time. I guess it was my favorite romance of the year because it's on top. Number 4 is Witch Shadow by Susan Dennard. This is the 4th and second to last book in the Witchland series. This is a YA fantasy that starts at the beginning of what seems to be a war brewing. It's multi-POV. As the series goes on, we add more characters. It is very well plotted. This book is just full of so many plot reveals that were just so good. I liked the structure. She changes the structure up a little bit. We have some flashbacks, and I think they're done very well. I really enjoyed reading this. Number 3 is Somebody's Daughter by Ashley C. Ford. This book follows Ford's relationship with her incarcerated father, her fraught relationship with her mother who raises her, her grandmother, and this book does deal a lot with a sexual assault that happens to Ashley when she is a teenager. This was just one of the most beautifully written and thoughtful and nuanced memoirs I've ever read. I was deeply moved by this book. I like it so much. I cannot recommend it highly enough. Also, it's short, and the audiobook's great. Number 2, but this could very easily be number 1 as well, is not surprising. It's The Fifth Season by N.K. Jemisin. This book is so good. I also could have done book 3, but I think that the elation I felt while reading book 1 kind of makes this book so special, even though I do love the rest of the series as well. This is an adult, kind of riding the line between fantasy and science fiction. I believe the author would categorize this as Afrofuturism. It is so good. We are set on a world that is full of natural disasters. There are kind of insular communities that are very protected from the outside world. We follow 3 characters, all who are origins, which are people who can use the magic of this world, which kind of is you can cause earthquakes kind of thing. Everybody hates origins. Big no-no. The book starts with the world ending. It's so interesting. I think this is the best plotted thing I have ever read. I was incredibly impressed when I realized what was happening. It was just how is someone such a genius? I don't know. I could never. This book is amazing. And then my favorite book of the year, is Circe by Madeline Miller. Clearly I like a feminist Greek retelling. I read this book in one day. I was deeply moved by it. I think about it all the time. I literally read it in January of 2021 and I was sure I'd probably just read my favorite book of the year. The 5th season gave it quite the run for its money, and this could be my second favorite one. You know, these things are hard. But this is a tremendous retelling of the Circe myth. I think that the way Miller engages with the Circe character is really interesting and nuanced and says a lot about the way gender was talked about in ancient Greece and also today. And I think Circe's just a really good character. And this is a tremendous book. I recommend it to everyone, especially to people who like Addie LaRue and Erin Morgenstern kind of things. Circe's great. I particularly loved the language and the deep dive into one very famous, very maligned character. I thought it was fascinating and incredibly well done. I'm not even gonna try to hold all 15 of those books. Sorry. Those are my favorite books I read in 2021, along with some of the stats of what I read. Thank you for watching. I will be attempting to be relatively consistent with video making, though I'm sure I will not be. But, yeah, thanks. Bye!